Hello, everyone, and welcome to our climate coffee break. I'm Elizabeth, the volunteer coordinator with Moms Clean Air Force. Thank you for spending part of your afternoon with us. On June 19th, our nation will celebrate Juneteenth officially. Juneteenth is a National Independence Day, a national holiday that commemorates the end of enslavement of Black people in this country. This month, we are recognizing Juneteenth, a celebration of freedom, resilience, and the ongoing work to build a more just future. At Moms Clean Air Force, we know that protecting children's health is a way that has connected a larger conversations about fairness, access to whose voices are being heard. We also know that progress has never happened because people waited for the perfect political moment. It happens because families show up, tell their stories, and build relationships and keep it going. Today, we are going to talk about hope and about how communities continue to organize and win, about the power of storytelling and how each of us can help create a healthier places for each child to live, learn, and play. I am so honored to be joined by Almeta Cooper, Moms Clean Air Force National Manager of Health Equity. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping notes. Today's coffee break is being recorded and will be shared with those who registered but weren't able to join us today. We will edit out the questions at the end for privacy purposes. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you are from. We encourage you to use the chat throughout today's conversation to share reflections and connect with one another. Also, if you have a question for Almeda, please drop them in the chat at any time. We'll save a few minutes at the end for Q&A, and we will do our best to get to as many questions as possible. My colleague Sam is joining us behind the scenes today. Sam will help us monitor the chat, sharing helpful resources and fact sheets, and she'll be collecting your questions for our Q&A portion at the end of the program. And finally, if today's conversation inspires you, we hope that you'll stay connected with Moms Clean Air Force. Invite a friend to our next coffee break, take action when opportunity arises, and remember that your voice and your story truly matter. So now let's get started. Almeda has spent decades working alongside communities to advance health equity and environmental justice. She has a remarkable ability to connect complex issues back to what matters most: people, relationships, and the belief that family deserve clean and a healthy future. Thank you so much for being here, Almeda. Would you
Oh,
like to say hello?
I'd love to say hello. And it's always a pleasure to be with you, Elizabeth and Sam, because you're such a pleasure to work with.
Well, thank you so much. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here. We will start with our first question. As we celebrate Juneteenth, many people reflect on how far we've come and how much work remains. When you think about this moment, what gives you hope?
It's interestingly, I recently had the opportunity to address just this topic when I was speaking with a group of people from the public health world. That was the audience. And when I think about hope, I think about the how fortunate I am that my foundation is Black joy, that my two loving parents created an environment for me to thrive and for them to inculcate me with good values, good home training, and a sense of community engagement and civic responsibility. And I add on top of all of that the fact that I have a wonderful, wonderful, almost 10-month-old grandson. And I know that I want a future for him that is consistent with the mission of Moms Clean Air Force, that I can protect clean air for him and that I can really work to oppose the triple threats of air pollution, climate change, and toxic chemicals.
Yes, having a strong foundation with your parents, I'm sure is a blessing even for your grandchild and the lessons that you're going to be passing on. And I know that sometimes through generations, it can feel like progress depends entirely on who is in office. And you've seen advocacy, if I can speak today, it happens when advocacy shows up in across administrations in different political shifts. What have you learned from your parents, from your experience as a grandmother, um, about showing up consistently, and how have you seen Moms Clean Air Force members make an impact regardless of who's in the White House?
So sometimes putting a situation in context is helpful. And one of the points that I've heard other people make is that even though with the current administration and the rollbacks and so many of the goals that we have as people who really advocate for children's health seems like it's can really be overwhelming. But believe it or not, I mean, especially because we're talking about Juneteenth, we've been in a worse place before and managed to overcome and have advance to where we are now, even though right now is not the ideal time. So when I usually talk with groups um, and representing Moms Can Air Force, what I say to them is that there are three actions I want you to think about in terms of being a good advocate. And one is to be informed, to speak up, and to take action. And in this moment, what we're seeing by the increase in membership that we've experienced, a significant number, by the increased number of people who are coming to our website, signing petitions, and by just what we see in terms of our in-person events and the other online events we have, is that people appreciate having a pathway to make their concerns known and that they're showing up. And so that is very encouraging.
I know you had mentioned that the three actions are be informed, speak up, and take action. And we're seeing that, obviously. We've seen our numbers grown tremendously over the years. What does that growth tell you about where people are right now? And what have you witnessed people realizing that not only caring about these issues, but why is it so important to celebrate the wins and find joy in these moments?
Well, it's definitely important to celebrate wins. And you can see some of the wins that we've had just among, well, I shouldn't say just, among our moms members. There's lots of people, both volunteers and coordinators. One example that I like to share is that Amanda Rowalt from Ohio was driving along and she saw, pollution billowing from a plastic incinerator plant. And she whipped out her cell phone, she took, a video, she reported that to the equivalent of the EPA in Ohio. And they did investigate, and the facility was cited on multiple occasions and is now scheduled to cease operations. So sometimes it's just, again, taking an action when you see something happening that is problematic or could be harming not only children, but you and your family, and taking action really makes a difference. And the other thing I want to say is that all of us have different skills and talents. And we can use whatever talents and skills we have. So we have Karine Stein, who has a wonderful ensemble that she performs around the country. And when she's performing on behalf of moms or Eco Madres, and then she tells the audience, hey, get involved with Moms Clean Air Force, get involved with Eco Madres, tell your elected officials, what you are dissatisfied with. So she's using one of her many talents, her musical talent, to really uplift the message that we have. And I know we're not all musically talented like Karine, but I'm just saying that we have talents that we don't always think. Oh, I have a talent and I can and do that. And we have an amazing volunteer in DC who makes saris for storytelling about climate. And that's from her cultural heritage of Bangladesh that she started doing this activity. Again, it's using the resources that you have and putting them into action. And that's what I encourage anybody when they ask me, like, oh, what can I do? Whatever their situation is. And I said, well, just draw on your own skills and talent because that's authentic. And people, when you are talking with others and trying to get this message out and trying to do this work, people really respond to, I believe, to authenticity.
Definitely. And that leads me into my next question for you. And you kind of answered it and why it's so important that we're advocating for public health and doing it in your own way of telling a story. And you don't have to be an expert per se to make your voice heard. And what would you say to folks who do say that? Like, hey, Omida, I'm not an expert on this. What can I do?
So I want to give an example, which is a recent example. I have a friend and colleague in San Francisco, and she happens to be a physician. Her name is Lisa Patel. But her son and husband went to a World Cup game in San Francisco, and they had a very strict limitation that you can only bring in a limited amount of water. And for people who know San Francisco, it's not typically hot, but this season of World Cup has been very hot. And when people ran out of their limited amount that they were allowed to bring in, and they went to the concession stands, and her husband went like after in a very short time after the game start, they were already sold out, and they were not allowing people to buy alternatives like soda because that was reserved for mixers. And she was so concerned when she heard this from her family that she just right there on the spot made a quick video, which she posted and which she told me has gone viral. Just saying, this is not acceptable. What about the fans? What about who are in the stands? What about, all of the people who are there? This is not a good policy. So again, it's kind of like the situation with Amanda. In the moment, you can take a situation and translate it into a message that is really going to resonate with other people.
And for folks who are noticing these things and seeing some injustices in their communities, in talking about environmental justice and in DEI, um, it sounds like a policy term, but at its core, but it's deeply human. And I know you and I had a discussion about this as we were prepping for this call.
Mhm.
How do you explain to environmental justice in a way that connects people who may be hearing it for the first time or don't have a great understanding of it? And how would some examples of plain language that you found is effective when you talk about inequities and losing sight of hope in some situations?
Well, because my work title is National Manager for Health Justice, people will ask me, like, what is that? So, well, I focus on the injustices that those who live in Black and Brown and under-resourced communities experience that are connected to health and climate. And what we know it from research and documentation that these communities typically experience adverse impacts of climate change first and worse. And what we want to do, not just at moms, but people who are concerned about these injustices, is that we want every person, regardless of zip code, to be able to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and live in a healthy neighborhood. And technology to say that people get it when you say that. They get the concept that not everyone is affected in the same way, that some people are affected more. And we can even dig down further because then we can start talking about children who are not little adults and who respirate and take in more dirty air than we do as adults, that's a concept that anyone can understand. And understanding that that's what we want for everyone is a way for people to understand without using special words.
I know that what's going to resonate with me is that everyone deserves healthy, clean air, no matter what their zip code is.
Right.
Um, and if someone leaves today's conversation wanting to do one thing to make a difference, what would you encourage them to do today? What message would you hope resonates with them as they leave this conversation? And what gives you confidence in moving this movement forward?
So one of the things that we know, because there's been research done by the Yale Climate Communication Center and the George Mason University Climate Communication Center, is that the majority of people in the United States acknowledge and accept that there is climate change. They are in favor of the values that I just shared with you about clean air, clean water, healthy neighborhood. And when people um, speak about the fact that they believe this, that is one of the simplest things you can do. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk about this in the same way that you talk about what the prices are at the grocery store, the same way that you talk about, the World Cup or, whatever sport you're following. Integrating this conversation into your everyday experience is a very low level entry level into making other people aware and starting to make a difference.
And I'm gonna throw one more question at you, Almeda.
Sure.
Just because, like, once again, I'm so inspired by our conversations whenever we have them. But if just kind of following up what you just said there, if you had to give just one little like tidbit of how to get involved with moms today, what would you tell them?
Well, it's a start that you're here in this conversation. So that's the one thing that you can do, and that's very good. You can go to Mom's website, and we have really worked to improve accessibility on our web page. And so you can find resources by subject matter. You can see the most current articles that are on the landing page. And if you just go to www.momscleanairforce.org, www.momscleanairforce.org, you can start there and you will find subject matter that resonates, that is important to you, and you can see that other people are speaking up. And we have a lot of very practical, I would call it consumer facing information, like talk with a doctor. If you have a question that you want answered by a doctor, or mom's detective, we have so many different pathways that you can find information that's helpful to you. And you can have that aha moment to say, oh, well, I'm not the only one who's worried about this. I'm not the only one who has this question. And then you can share that information again with your friends and family, and if you were like me, with people that you meet, you're like, oh, did you know this? But just at least you can start with your friends and family.
I often joke that I can change any conversation into a climate conversation. It's true. It really is true.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
up for the challenge if anyone wants to challenge me on that. But this is one of my favorite parts of the conversation is when I get to open it up to our audience to see if anyone would like to come off mute and ask Almeda a question, our expert we have here today. If you're feeling shy, you can also drop it in the chat and Sam will help us read that off. Does anyone have a question for Almeda today?